the benefit of going out in person with someone is you kind of have this instant rapport, right? Instead of looking face to face at each other, you are shoulder to shoulder looking at something together. And I think that that changes the dynamic of the conversation. And so you can be co-observers and co-inquirers, and you can be wondering about things and examining things together and follow your curiosity. So I think that there's a really organic part of that process where you're able to be immersed in the topic in a really deep way.
Welcome to Wild Development Studio. Join us as we venture into the breathtaking realm of wildlife arts and untamed adventures. With captivating stories from the field and ideas to dive into the visual arts, we'll ignite your passion for conservation. Get ready to develop something wild.
Michelle Fulner is an English teacher, California naturalist, mom to 2 kids, nature podcaster, pursuer of too many hobbies, and a curious, adventurous type. Her childhood dreams included tiger trainer, marine biologist, and being on SNL. Hobbies include having more plants than she can properly take care of, intermittently practicing Spanish, following drawing tutorials on YouTube, hiking short distances with regular stops to flip over logs, travel, iPhone photography, and creative writing. Her podcast, Golden State Naturalist, is about asking questions and experiencing wonder. It is a place to bring your curiosity about the natural world in California. Well, hello, Michelle. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Lauren.
So you created Golden State Naturalist. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think of it as a love letter to the ecological past, present, and future of California. So really, it's an exploration going out into the landscapes of California, talking to different experts, and learning about the species, the geology, the natural history of this place that I and about 40 million other people call home.
So what were you doing before you started Golden State Naturalist, and what inspired you to get started in this?
Yeah, for sure. So it's a long journey for me. Going way back, I was definitely that nature kid. Spent a lot of time outdoors as a kid catching, things that I would not advise a child to do, right? Like I was catching bats with my bare hands and like snakes and all kinds of things without knowing really what I was doing. I was like, cool creature. So I was doing that kind of stuff. And then as I got older, I was really interested in reading and in literature and in writing. And so that's the path that I took in my education. And I ended up getting my degrees in English, becoming an English teacher. And I was an English teacher in California public schools, middle through high school levels for 10 years. And so I was
all the hard years.
Yes, right. Yeah. And I loved high school years. I really loved teaching the upper grades. And so I really had a lot of fun, like with juniors and seniors the most. But I also taught middle school.
That's the worst.
Those are the tough for me, right? Like those were the toughest.
Mm.
And there were aspects of that that I really loved and felt very privileged to be able to do. But I did also feel like I had left behind my roots, right? Of spending that time connecting with the natural world. And I had a really hard time figuring out how to integrate that into the work that I was already doing with everything else that needs to go on in the classroom, right? So it's very hard to integrate those things. And I ended up taking a naturalist course. It's offered through the University of California. It's California Naturalist, and there's programs in many states. So it might be called like Master Naturalist in different states. I took the California version and I was so in love, right? Like I was so in love with everything that I was learning, the geology, the plants, the animals, the history. Like it was just fascinating. And as the course started to wind down, I only had 1 or 2 weeks left. I was kind of panicking, right? I was like, what am I going to do? This is going to go back to not being part of my everyday life. And I can't let that happen, right? I just got this back. I need for this to become part of my everyday life. And I was like, well, maybe I could just listen to a podcast on this topic. So I start looking in the podcast directories, and there's nature podcasts, and there's some really good nature podcasts, but there wasn't anything local to California. And I kind of wanted something that was statewide because the incredible diversity, right, of landscapes in California and bioregions. I wanted to learn about a lot of those different places and creatures, and there just wasn't something. And so this little voice was like, well, you could start one. Right. And I was like, no, like that sounds like a lot of work. I got enough on my plate. I got little kids, like I'm a teacher. And I just couldn't silence that little voice. It just kind of kept coming back to me. And I kept thinking about the people that I could talk to and the places I could go and the format that the show could be. And I could do on-site interviews out in the field. And so I was like, well, you know what, let's give it a try. And that's really where this started. And then from there, I've got 40 episodes or so now, somewhere in that range. And I've been doing it for 2 years. Each episode, because it's out in the field and I'm integrating a field portion and a sit down interview into one episode. It's a lot of editing. It's a lot of traveling. So I am slow. I only do one every other week. I'm a one woman team. So it's a slow process, but it's also expanded into more. How can I also get onto social media? How can I also try to do some visual storytelling? So it's sort of expanded in a few different ways throughout this 2-year process. And it's becoming a more multifaceted kind of beyond just the podcast.
I love that you mentioned the Master Naturalist. Ohio has the Ohio Certified Volunteer Naturalist, and I did that in 2020. It was all online, so I missed the out in the field aspect, but I felt the same way. I'm like, okay, I learned all this information and now I want to share it with everybody. What do I do? So kind of similar paths there. That's so funny.
That is really cool.
You said you go out in the field when you interview. So
Yes.
What are some benefits to that? And do you like being one-on-one and out in the field when you're recording?
Yeah, the first couple of times I did, I was wondering if I was crazy, right? I'm like, I'm going into nature, into the back 40 with a man I don't know, right? Like, is this a good idea? And of course, these are people who are wonderful people. I'm not honestly worried about it, or I wouldn't be doing it. But I think as a woman in this world, you kind of fear and you kind of worry. And I've had such good experiences every single time. And I think that the benefit of going out in person with someone is you kind of have this instant rapport, right? Instead of looking face to face at each other, you are shoulder to shoulder looking at something together. And I think that changes the dynamic of the conversation. And so you can be co-observers and co-inquirers, and you can be wondering about things and examining things together and follow your curiosity. So I think that there's a really organic part of that process where you're able to be immersed in the topic in a really deep way. And so, for example, one of my favorite locations for an interview was a beaver dam, right? And so I got to go out and see a beaver dam with a beaver biologist. And so she's teaching me about how beavers fight, are incredible for drought and wildfire and how they can actually stop fires. And I'm able to be there. We climb up on top of a beaver dam together, right? And we're standing there looking at the beaver pond and how the water level above and below are so different. And it does something really different to my understanding that then I can bring into the interviews and I can bring into my questions a fuller understanding that then I think I can communicate better as somebody who's not an expert, right, in these fields. Giving me that hands-on experience, getting the expert in the place where they're comfortable, I think they really open up in a different way. And I'm able to engage and understand with it on a different level than I otherwise would be able to.
So it was, okay, so the beaver dam, going back to that,
Mm-hmm.
in your intro where they were talking about the watch out for the pointy sticks, was that the beaver dam episode?
Yes. Because beavers, it's really funny. I think that it was in England, they had found these pointy sharpened sticks and they were like, these sticks are from a time like before there were Homo sapiens in this place, right? And they were like, why are there these sharpened sticks? But the beavers had been extinct locally from England for a long time. So they didn't make the connection. And they eventually realized that they were sticks sharpened by beavers. They look like what we would expect to be maybe spears, but they're made by animals.
So yeah, you get a lot more that being one-on-one with somebody out in the field than you would as we are, with Zoom, which I mean, that's a benefit.
Hey, you know what? I wouldn't be able to talk to you otherwise.
Yeah, exactly.
We're too far apart. So there's pros and cons.
There is pros and cons, which speaking of, so what are some challenges that you faced out in the field when you're, because, electronics and batteries and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it definitely adds a lot of layers of difficulty. You can't control the sound environment when you're outside. A plane flies over, I'm super aware of it because I know I have to edit that and what it's going to sound like. My guest isn't aware of that, right? Because most people don't think about those ambient background sounds. And that's totally normal. And they're in the zone talking about the thing that they're talking about. And I really hate to interrupt someone and be like, oh, sorry, I know that you're like totally jiving on this topic, but please stop. And then like, let's wait for the plane to fly over. So that's not exhilarating. I don't love that. That's one challenge. I definitely have to make sure to bring enough batteries with me, things like that. I have had some issues. I just upgraded my mics, which I'm so excited about.
Nice.
Thank you, Patreon. I just upgraded my mics, but I was using wired mics. And I liked the reliability of that because you didn't have to worry about a signal issue. But what I found is eventually those wires might start to make some noises and there can just be issues with that kind of thing. So it's not a super controlled environment. That can be a challenge for recording. I would say that's probably the biggest challenge of being out there.
You can always have a blooper reel.
Yeah, it's true.
Bonus content. So can people go to your Patreon do you do video too while you're doing this? And can they view that on Patreon?
I don't do video while I'm recording. A lot of times what I'll do is, because I just don't have it set up. I've interviewed John Muir Laws on nature journaling. And so I did have a camera set up while we sat and did some nature journaling together on like a mineral flat by the San Francisco Bay. So I do have some video of that. Because I edit the podcast so heavily, it would be really hard to concurrently edit the video to match the audio, right? Like I edit the audio. And so what I've ended up with, and I don't do it very often, so like in that situation, I ended up with a bunch of basically B-roll that I could use for other things. And so I did use it that way some, but I don't find that for me having in that situation, unless I had some really good cameras set up and some really great editing on a level that I'm not quite ready to take it to, I don't think the visuals would be adding that much to the conversation at this point. So what I do instead is I'll either get there a little bit early or stay a little bit late after the interview, and I'll do a little bit of recording just with my phone, like here's kind of what we looked at, and just kind of get some footage. And then I can sometimes make like a social media reel or, put together a visual that's maybe a shorter condensed format to go with one of the topics that's in the episode.
Because you said you're doing this all by yourself. So
yes,
it'd be hard to focus on a podcast and video and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, at this point, it's just too multifaceted. I think that if I ever were to develop into having a team, then that would be really cool. But part of it too is I really like the mobility of us just having the mics and we can just move locations. And I think if we were doing cameras and stuff too, especially if there were good quality cameras, it would be a lot of stuff to lug around without having a dedicated person to do that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't understand or even begin to realize how much editing goes into just the audio part of a podcast alone.
Sure. Totally.
Now, you brought up John Muir Laws, and I downloaded this weeks and weeks ago before I even came across you on TikTok. And then I finally realized I'm audio. I'm holding up a little zine. It's called 7 Ways to Connect with Nature. And I got that through Wild Wonder Foundation. And you help inspire this. How'd that come about?
Okay, so thank you that is so funny that you found that. Yeah, no, I love Wild Wonder Foundation. They're absolutely phenomenal. And I feel really privileged to have gotten to work with them. So the story of that zine is that I made a New Year's episode for the beginning of 2023. And in that episode, it was 7 ways to connect with nature this year. And I just came up with a bunch of ideas that are things that have really helped me, which is why I think it's going to be really hard for me to come up with one. But I came up with ways that have been really helpful for me to connect with nature. And I think that a kind of a multi-sensory, multi-layered approach, right, of connecting with the natural world. I just put all that into an episode, put it out into the world, walked away, worked on other things, blah, 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 whatever. I got an email a couple of weeks later from an artist named Kate Rutter, saying, I listened to your episode. It really resonated with me. I created a sketch note of all of the ways to connect with nature that you included, and a way of like keeping track of, are we doing these things, every month or how many times this year? And I was completely floored because her art was gorgeous, right? She did this beautiful image, like a sun with like all of these ideas, like radiating out from the center of the sun. It was so beautiful. And I shared that on social media, and then some time went by and Kate and then Beth Galogli, who is the executive director of the Wild Wonder Foundation, approached me and were like, hey, what if we took this graphic and we turned it into a zine? And I was like, yes, I love that. Any way that we can get this information to people to inspire them, different ways to connect with the natural world, I am always in favor of that. And so, yeah, they took the concepts from the episode. Kate formatted everything, took her sketch note and took her art and reformatted it and put it into zine format so you can print it out for free from their website, have access to this, and then have even a tracker for the ways that you're connecting with nature throughout the course of a year.
It's a beautiful zine. And like I said, I printed that out a long time ago. I'm going to leave a link in the show description notes so everybody can download this and to your website as well, so they can listen too. Doing nature journaling with John, how amazing was that?
Oh man, yeah, it was such a privilege because I think I got connected with his content in 2020 also. And it was kind of the perfect pandemic thing, right? For me, I had started my California Naturalist course in March of 2020. And I went to the first one and we were socially distanced. It was like early pandemic. It was like the first, week or something. And they were like, after today, we went to the one, and then after we got a notification that was like, we have to postpone this course because they really wanted to keep the in-person section. But in that first class, I learned about John Muir Laws. I learned about his books. And so I went and I was like, well, I'm going to learn all this stuff on my own. So I went and I got his book, the Laws Guide to Nature Journaling. I found him on YouTube. I watched a bunch of his videos on nature journaling. And so I got really interested in that. And so going out there with him, it was like, I'm hanging out with like a celebrity, right? Like it was so cool. Yeah. He is just as kind as he seems in all of his online, stuff. He's very approachable, he meets people where they are, which I really admire, right? And it's never about like, oh, your picture isn't pretty enough, right? It's like, how are your observations? What do you notice here? How can you ask questions about what you're looking at? And I think that it really directs in a very powerful way our ability to make deep observations.
Absolutely. So are you an artist, or were you?
No. I definitely have been learning, right? And I don't make as much time for it as I would like to. I saw a lot of improvement following along with his videos, but literally that was like my art journey, right? It was like, let's try this based on watching your videos. So it's kind of the practice that I did there. And I definitely saw a lot of improvement, but I don't consider myself an artist. I did make my first bear, my logo. The original one I did. The one that you see now is I paid an artist to do that. I was like, please, somebody come upgrade this.
Now I'm gonna have to look up your old one. I'm sure it's fabulous.
It's out there somewhere. You know what? I'm gonna change this soon, but because I just went on YouTube and I was like, oh my God, this is embarrassing. But I went and I found like a very early thing that I had put on YouTube, and then I've like abandoned my YouTube since then because it just was one more thing to do. Mm-hmm. I think I'm gonna start putting my episodes up there just so that if people want to find them there, they can. But I have like the original old art, and then it's like, don't forget to subscribe. It's like the corniest, it's the most like, you don't know what you're doing on YouTube and then you're gonna abandon it in 5 minutes, like thing that you've ever seen. So anyways, you can go look at that. If you go soon, you can see.
Oh, as soon as we hang up, I'm going right there. Hey, they say if you're not embarrassed by your first thing that you did, then you waited too long.
That's so good. I love that. That's so good.
And what I love about nature journaling, and this is something that I've heard John say in your interview and through the books and everything, like it's not just about the art, it's about the observation and the connecting. And I find when I do my nature journaling practice, it really just puts me in the moment. Yeah, I can put my phone and all the notifications away, and you connect with nature, and it's fabulous.
It's incredible. It's such a mindfulness experience. A flow experience and a mindfulness experience. It's great.
And so when I first came across you, it was on TikTok a couple weeks ago with your series, Talk Like a Naturalist.
Yeah.
I love when people come up with all these creative ways to connect with nature, because that's my mission too. Mm-hmm. You are using language as a way for people to connect with nature. Why do you think language is so important?
My background is as an English teacher, right? And so language has been a fundamental way for me to interface with the world around me. And one of the most powerful ways for me to engage with something, and what I've learned through being a teacher and through my own experiences is that the more words we have, the more concepts we have, right? To teach a word is to teach a concept, and to teach a concept and have the language around it is a way of engaging on a deeper level. And so it's a way of being able to say, hey, I see this thing. If I don't have a word for it, if I don't know why it's important, it means nothing to me. My brain filters it out, right? But if I have a word and a concept to hang that thing on, now I'm walking through the woods and I see a snag and I'm like, oh, that dead standing tree, that's called a snag. And I know why that's important to wildlife. I know that bats can roost under the bark, and I know that insects can make their home in the dead wood. And I know that, hawks might sit on top and look for animals to hunt. So giving those concepts and giving the language allows a way of deeper connection. So for me, the intersection of science and language is a really happy spot for me, because as somebody with not a science background, but with a language background, it's a way in. And I think that a lot of people don't have the science background, but we all have a language background. We all, if you're watching the video and not understanding it, you understand the language that we're the common language that we have together, right? And so you're able to draw on your own experience as a person using language and learning language to be able to expand your understanding of the world around you.
I think that's so important. You don't have to have a science background or be an expert in anything to connect with nature. I'm using art and visuals, storytelling. You're using language and the storytelling with your podcast. You don't have to be a professional to enjoy nature.
Absolutely.
So what is a podcast that you've done that lives rent-free in your head? You think about it all the time. It still resonates with you.
Oh gosh, that is so hard. I feel like every single one of them has changed me in some way. And I think that's part of the power of having the ability, keeping it to one state, having the ability to go out into the field for these interviews. Those experiences and those connections with people have really stayed with me. Oh goodness. But a particular one, I really enjoyed talking to Griffith for Redwood Trees. He is hilarious. He is super fun and also very knowledgeable and very grounded and has a very big picture understanding. So that one I think about a lot. Definitely the experience of going to the beaver dam was just so fun and so novel. It was something that I've never done before. And the most recent one that I did on traditional ecological knowledge or traditional indigenous ecological knowledge with Frank Lake was also, I think, a huge kind of paradigm shifter, or like a way to expand my understanding of this place called California. And of course, a lot of this applies across the country, of indigenous land relationships and land management. And it changes the way that I look at California and the way that, pre-colonialism, we're not talking about a wilderness. Like, that's an inaccurate way to think about California pre-colonialism, because it was a garden, right? And so it's a really important paradigm shift. And I think that one is one that kind of can inform a lot of the other work that I do in the way that I look at the world.
I knew that question wasn't fair, for the record.
Oh man, yeah, so hard. Like, all of can I say all of them?
I know, like, seriously, every single episode that as podcasters, you learn something from every single person, and you grow a little bit with each one. So I knew that was not a fair question. But
it's okay though. It's a good opportunity to reflect. It's, I'd probably give you a different answer every day if you asked me every day.
It's totally understandable. Do you have an ideal guest, like a guest wish list?
You mean like individuals that I'd like to interview? Oh my gosh. I wouldn't mind talking to like Jane Goodall. I know that's nothing to do with California, but just OG, conservationist, and like her understanding of integrating into like chimpanzees, and like her hands-on experiences and way of looking at the world, I think, are really cool. And she's just a legend, right? So I think that there's a few people like that who are kind of on that level that are aspirational. It would be very cool to talk to. In California, I've had the immense privilege of talking to a lot of people who are on that list already: Obie Kaufman, John Muir Laws. And so that, that was really cool. I would also love to talk to Robin Wall Kimmerer, who wrote Braiding Sweetgrass. She's definitely on the list. I would, maybe faint in a conversation with her. So hopefully I'd be able to stay conscious the entire time because I wouldn't be too excited. But yeah.
I just heard about that book. I followed the Black Forager too on TikTok, and she
Oh yeah.
mentioned that book,
She's
and
great.
I ordered it. So it's funny that you bring it up. It's good.
Oh, it's my favorite. It's my favorite book about ecology or natural history at all periods. So she's a botanist and she's a member of the Potawatomi Nation. And so she's braiding together these experiences of like Western and indigenous knowledge around her expertise in botany. And it's so beautifully done. She's a master storyteller, beautiful writer. The audiobook is narrated by her and she's got the most soothing voice in the whole world. She's just wonderful. So yeah, I've read it twice. I love that book so much. It's definitely. And then Frank from the traditional ecological knowledge episode I was just telling you about has co-written papers with her and things like that. And so I'm like, those two speak to a lot of the same issues, but from different angles because Frank does more like fire and she's more plants. And so I would love to talk to her. She's an expert in mosses. I'd love to talk to her about moss.
So cool.
Mm-hmm.
I can't wait to get my hands on that book.
Oh, it's
Couple
great.
more days, Amazon.
Yes, get there.
Yes. Do you have a pivot point or a moment in your life where you can mark that is where I fell in love with nature?
Oh, that's so hard. I had the incredible advantage of having a lot of time outdoors as a very small child. And I think for me, a lot of it was hyper local in my backyard, right? And so I was a kid growing up. I grew up in Napa. My dad had a big garden in the backyard. We had plum trees in the backyard. And so a lot of it was just that unstructured opportunity to play and to dig a hole and like take a mud bath and like help my dad grow tomatoes or like walk through the corn rows in our backyard. And then as I got older, moving out into the country and having all those very cool experiences of getting to catch little mice or whatever we were catching. I think that those moments were really huge. But I don't think I can point to just one because it was like I said, it was just an incredible privilege to have many layered experiences over time.
All right. I want to normalize adults talking about their favorite animal. So what is your favorite animal?
Oh my gosh. I feel like I should be like on brand and say one from California. But my favorite animal since the time I was a very small child was a Siberian tiger. I love tigers. I don't know what it is. They are my Patronus. Like I love them so deeply. And like to the point where when I was a kid, I asked for a tiger for Christmas. Every year I would put it as the first 10 things on my Christmas list. I was like, don't give me anything else. I don't care. If you must, I'll take an easy bake oven. But what I really want is a tiger. I did not understand why my parents wouldn't give me one. So yeah, I think that has to be my answer. The California creature that I think is very kind of maybe my favorite, but that's just kind of surprising for a lot of people is the ringtail. So like they call them ringtail cats. They're not cats. They're related to raccoons, but they look like lemurs and they have these long tails that have rings on them, which is why they're called ringtails. And they are here and nobody knows it because they're very secretive. They're nocturnal and they just hang out in the trees and like eat mistletoe. And they also eat, I think, bugs and other creatures. I'm not sure everything they eat, but yeah, they look like lemurs and we have them in California and no one knows that.
I did not know that. That's gonna be the second thing I look up after I look up your old logo.
Ringtails. They're the cutest. They are so cute.
Oh man. Yet we have an animal like that in Ohio. The flying squirrel is the most prolific squirrel in Ohio. I've only ever seen one once in the wild because they're nocturnal. So you're not going to see them. And they're so little.
You probably need some like infrared to be able to find them.
Yeah, for sure. What is your favorite spot in nature? And it doesn't have to be in California, but you can include both if it's not in California.
Oh man. Okay. My favorite spot. Okay. I have two favorite spots in nature. Both are in California. My absolute favorite, I mean, I sometimes say to my husband, and I'm so dramatic, right? But like, it's so true. I'm like, my whole heart is 32 acres of oak woodland in Napa, because the place where I lived as a kid with my great grandfather was a 32-acre piece of beautiful valley oaks, coast live oaks, and the incredible diversity that comes in oak woodlands in California. There's such an important ecosystem. And so it's full of, California newts and ringneck snakes and all kinds of just absolute treasures. And so I say that is my number one. Unfortunately, it's private property and not owned by my family anymore, so I don't have access to that anymore. But that is my favorite place in the whole world. And then my second one would be the place where I went to summer camp as a kid in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada, which is in Grizzly Flats. So yeah, that's beautiful, conifer forests and open meadows and just beautiful foothills.
What was your favorite activity in summer camp? Do you remember?
Riding horses.
Oh,
Absolutely no contest. And then I ended up working there when I got older, and I brought my dirt bike. So I would like bring my dirt bike out and cruise around on the trails. But whenever I got the opportunity, what I really loved was to steal a horse. And I'd be like, all right, I'm on like a break. I'm going to steal a horse and I'm going to go for a ride. So that was definitely, we used to steal the horses and then play tag like at night. Yeah, on horseback, tag on horseback, like hit each other on the helmet to tag each other. We were kind of insane, but it was a lot of fun. I just really loved horseback riding. I think it was a really nice way to quietly connect with a place, right? You don't have this loud engine. You're on an animal. So
sounds like so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
How can people find you? That's an important one.
Yeah. So Instagram is probably the best one for social media, because TikTok, I'm gonna be totally honest with you, I need to work on my TikTok more, but I just post everything that I've already posted on Instagram on TikTok, minus the like static posts, which also will tell about like episodes and things like that. So Instagram, Golden State Naturalist, that's the number one. TikTok is good. I've got a Facebook page. You can go to my website, goldenstatenaturalist.com. You can get on my email list. There's so many ways, to connect. I try to be everywhere. And that is definitely, I would say probably Instagram is number one.
Yeah, same. That's where I'm trying to focus the most. Mm-hmm. Where do you see Golden State Naturalist, the future? What are your big hopes and dreams for that?
I mean, the insane hope and dream is to reach all Californians, right? And I realize the loftiness of that goal. This is 40 million people we're talking about. But I think that every single person who lives here should have the opportunity to know what's going on right outside their door. And I want everyone to have that kind of access and that ability to have a really low barrier for entry, right? Just push play on a podcast to be able to connect with a place that is right there. Because I think that all of us are ecological creatures, whether we realize it or not. We are dependent on the ecosystems around us. We are who we are because of the ecosystems around us. And I want that for everyone here. So that is the really lofty, ridiculous goal. And anything that gets me closer to that goal, I'm really pleased with.
It's a good goal. I hope you reach it.
Thank you.
And before we go, what is one tip that you would have for somebody that would like to connect with nature?
So this one is so tough. Like you said, I made an episode with 7. How do I pick one? But I think that
download the zine.
Right. Download the zine. That's number one. I would say, honestly, it really depends a lot on where you're starting from and how much you're already connecting with nature. But if this is something that's new for you, I mean, looking at a blade of grass is connecting with nature. Taking a breath of fresh air, looking up at the clouds is connecting with nature. So taking any moment that you can, especially if it's in your stressful busy day, right? Where you can stop and look up at the branches of a tree and feeling that sense of awe that there are things that are bigger than me. I am not the biggest thing in the world. It can bring a real sense of peace and groundedness and that sense of wonder of there really is so much beauty in the world.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Lauren. It's been a real delight.
And until next time, get outside and see what develops.
Thanks for joining Wild Development Studio. We hope this exploration into the world of wildlife arts and adventure has sparked a desire to get outside and connect with something wild. If you have an adventure that's awe-inspiring, don't hesitate to share. Click the link in the description to submit your story to have it featured on our show or be a guest. Until next time, keep connecting to the wild and see what develops. The views, opinions, and statements expressed by individuals during Wild Development Studio productions do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of Wild Development Studio or its affiliates. Participation in any activities, expeditions, or adventures discussed or promoted during our content may involve inherent risks. It is strongly advised that individuals conduct thorough research, seek professional guidance, and take all necessary precautions before engaging in any such activities. Wild Development Studio, its representatives, or employees shall not be held responsible for any injury, loss, damage, accident, or unforeseen incident that may occur as a result of participating in activities inspired by or discussed in our content. By choosing to engage with our content or act upon any information provided, individuals do so at their own risk and discretion.